The morning mist still hung low over the quiet riverbank when Jack Morgan cast his first line into the icy stream. A retired ranger and widower in his late 50s, Jack had spent the last 10 years seeking solace in this remote part of Alaska. Here, time stood still, interrupted only by the occasional eagle's cry or the splash of a trout. The solitude gave him comfort, a shield against the memories of the family he once had, and the life that had slipped through his fingers. That morning, however, a strange unease settled over the valley. The birds that usually chirped in the trees had gone silent. Even the wind held its breath. Jack felt it in his bones, the kind of stillness that speaks of something unnatural. Suddenly, the bushes across the river rustled. Jack instinctively reached for the rifle strapped to his back, his heart pounding. But he froze when the intruder emerged. A massive brown bear stepped out from the foliage, its fur matted with leaves and mud, its eyes sunken with exhaustion. Jack's first instinct was to shout, to wave his arms or fire a warning shot. But the bear didn't charge or roar. Instead, it sat down. The bear lowered itself gently to the ground like a tired dog at the end of a long day. It didn't snarl. It didn't growl. It simply looked at Jack. Jack stared back, stunned. He'd seen bears act curiously around humans before, but never like this. The bear let out a soft, almost mournful groan. Then, in an act so human it gave Jack chills, the bear raised one heavy paw and gestured toward the bucket of fish by his feet. "What the hell?" Jack muttered. The bear didn't budge. Its eyes didn't leave his. Jack's instincts screamed at him to run, to back away slowly. But something in those eyes stopped him. There was no threat, no malice, only hunger, and something else. Desperation. Carefully, Jack picked up one of the fish and tossed it across the river. The bear caught it in its jaws, but instead of eating it, it turned and began walking towards the forest. Every few steps it looked back at Jack, groaning softly. "Are you asking me to follow?" Jack whispered, half to himself. After a moment's hesitation, Jack grabbed his coat, slung his rifle over his shoulder, and stepped into the river. The icy water soaked through his boots. But he barely noticed. The bear's tracks were easy to follow, pressed deep into the muddy forest floor. Jack moved cautiously, senses on high alert. Every now and then the bear would stop, glance back, and continue. It wasn't running. It wasn't afraid. It had a purpose. Then he saw it, a pink mitten snagged on a thorn bush. Jack's heart stopped. He stepped closer and picked it up. It was small, clearly a child's, still warm as if recently worn. Memories surged up like a tide. His daughter Emily, her laugh, her tiny hands in his. The day she got lost in the woods. And never came back. He clenched the mitten in his hand and looked up. The bear was waiting ahead, unmoving. "Where are you taking me?" he whispered. The trail became steeper, leading down a narrow ravine. Suddenly, a distant cry echoed through the trees. Jack froze. It was faint, but unmistakable. A child's cry. The bear quickened its pace, and Jack followed. They reached a thicket of vines draped over a rocky outcrop. The bear stopped and sat, just like before. Jack brushed the vines aside and saw the dark mouth of a cave. The air inside was cold, laced with the scent of earth, pine, and something else, something human. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. At first he saw only shadows, then shapes, and then a figure huddled against the far wall, small, shivering. A girl. Jack dropped to his knees. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here to help." The girl looked up, tears streaking her face. She couldn't have been older than 6. Behind him, the bear let out a long, low groan and backed away. Jack turned to look, but it was already gone. He scooped the girl into his arms. She clung to him like a lifeline. As he stepped out of the cave and into the fading light, the wind picked up again. Birds chirped, the forest exhaled, and Jack, for the first time in years, felt something break open inside his chest. The forest seemed to stretch forever as Jack carried the little girl in his arms, her head resting weakly on his shoulder. Each step through the dense terrain echoed with silent questions and heavy breaths. The bear had vanished into the trees, as if its job had been done, but Jack knew better. Animals didn't act without instinct, and this bear's actions were anything but natural. The girl was too weak to speak. She clung to him instinctively, like he was a lighthouse in a sea of darkness. Her clothes were torn, her skin scratched by branches and thorns. She had survived somehow in these woods, and Jack knew it hadn't been on her own. He stopped by a fallen log and gently laid her down on his coat. The air was colder now, and the sun hung low. He pulled out his emergency blanket and wrapped it around her small frame, then opened his pack for a protein bar. He took a few bites himself before tearing off small pieces and holding them to her mouth. "Here, sweetheart, you need to eat." Her lips moved slightly. She took a few bites, her eyes barely open. "What's your name?" he asked softly. No answer, just a faint breath. Jack looked around. He had to get her to safety, but they were deep in the woods, and night was closing in. And then, like a shadow, the bear returned. It stood at the edge of the clearing, silent, watching. Jack felt no fear, only awe. The bear didn't approach. It simply turned and walked away, slowly, stopping to glance back. Jack narrowed his eyes. "You're leading me again, aren't you?" He picked the girl up, wrapped tight in the blanket, and followed. His legs ached, his breath came in shallow bursts, but he didn't stop. As they moved deeper, Jack began to see signs. Broken branches, claw marks on trees, crushed grass. The bear had walked this path before. Recently. It was clearing the way for him. Memories flooded back. Emily, his daughter, lost when she was 6. One moment she was playing near the edge of the trail, the next she was gone. Search parties, helicopters, weeks of hope, followed by months of grief. He had never forgiven himself. Now here he was again, carrying a little girl through the same kind of wilderness, guided not by search dogs or rangers, but by a wild bear. A sound snapped him from his thoughts, a howl in the distance. Wolves. The bear stopped ahead. Jack froze. Another howl, closer this time. Suddenly, from the brush, a wolf appeared. Then another. Jack's grip on the girl tightened. He took a step back. The bear roared. A thunderous sound echoed through the trees as the bear charged forward, placing itself between Jack and the wolves. Teeth bared, claws ready, the bear stood its ground. The wolves hesitated, growled, and then retreated. One by one, they vanished into the woods. Jack's knees buckled with relief. The bear turned and looked at him. No longer a guardian, but a guide once again. They moved on. The trees began to thin as they reached a ridge. From the top, Jack could see the outline of an old firewatch cabin. Broken roof, shattered window, but shelter nonetheless. The bear climbed the ridge with surprising ease and paused at the cabin's porch. Jack followed, his legs trembling with exhaustion. He pushed the door open. Dust and cobwebs filled the air. But it was dry, and there was wood in the corner. He laid the girl on the floor, near the old fireplace. He found matches in a rusted drawer and lit the fire with shaking hands. Warmth flooded the room. The bear stood at the doorway, watching. Jack turned to it, eyes glassy. "Why are you helping us?" The bear didn't answer, of course, but it lingered for a moment longer, then turned and disappeared into the night. Jack sat by the fire, the girl sleeping beside him. He looked into the flames, his mind a whirlwind of confusion, memories, and something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. As he drifted into a light sleep, a soft whisper echoed in his mind. Not all who are lost are meant to be alone. Jack awoke to the crackle of firelight and the soft, steady breathing of the girl beside him. He didn't move at first, afraid that if he did, the warmth, the girl, and everything he'd seen might vanish like a fragile dream. But it was all real. He looked out the broken window. The first light of dawn was creeping through the trees. Mist clung to the forest floor, and frost dusted the leaves. The girl stirred slightly, murmuring something in her sleep. Jack knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her breathing was steady now, her skin warmer. She was recovering. Suddenly, a faint thump echoed on the porch. Jack stood and stepped towards the door, already knowing what he'd see. The bear. It was back, standing quietly at the edge of the porch, its eyes fixed on him, waiting. Jack sighed, almost smiling. "You're not done, are you?" He wrapped the girl tightly in the blanket, gathered his gear, and gently lifted her into his arms once again. With one last glance at the fire, he followed the bear into the cold dawn. The trail was different this time. Rocky, uphill, winding between narrow ridges and hidden valleys. The trees began to thin. Snow still clung to the shadows. The wind was stronger, whispering strange echoes through the peaks. Hours passed. Jack stopped briefly to rest and let the girl drink water. The bear continued to lead them, never rushing, always waiting. Finally, they reached a narrow ridge overlooking a dark cave nestled in the rocks. From inside, Jack heard soft movement, breathing. He approached slowly, heart pounding. Inside the cave, 2 bear cubs lay curled together, weak but alive. And beside them, huddled in the corner, was another child. Jack's breath caught in his throat. A boy, maybe 7 or 8, wrapped in a torn jacket, cheeks sunken from cold, lips cracked. He looked up with wide, glassy eyes. The girl in Jack's arms stirred and gasped. "Danny?" The boy blinked and pushed himself up. "Sophie?" Jack set her down, and the 2 children rushed into each other's arms, clinging and sobbing. "We're cousins," Danny said through tears. "We were on a family hike. I fell down a hill and got lost. Then I found this cave. The bear, she brought me food. She protected me." Jack knelt beside the cubs, who didn't flinch from him. He turned and looked at the great bear standing silently behind him. "You gave up your cave, left your cubs, for them," Jack whispered. "You risked everything." The bear gently nudged one of her cubs, then looked to Jack. There was understanding in her eyes, deep, ancient understanding. Not just instinct, but empathy. She had chosen to trust him. Jack stood, wiping his eyes. "Let's get them home." The bear stepped aside as he lifted Danny and took Sophie's hand. They began their descent, and behind them, the bear gave one last glance at her cubs, then vanished into the trees. Snow began to fall as Jack and the children made their way back through the forest. The flakes were gentle at first, swirling softly between the trees, but soon they thickened, coating branches, hiding trails, and making every step harder. Jack carried Danny in one arm and held Sophie's hand tightly in the other. His shoulders ached, his boots were soaked, but his spirit burned stronger than ever. They crossed frozen streams, stumbled over rocks, and ducked under hanging limbs. Jack recognized the landmarks now, familiar trees, twisted roots, the spot where the wolves had appeared. But the bear was gone. There was no sign of her. By dusk, they reached the old fire watch cabin once again. Jack threw open the door, set the children near the cold hearth, and went to work. He gathered what dry wood he could, lit the fire, and warmed them with blankets and shared body heat. The children were exhausted but safe. They clung to Jack like he was the last solid thing in the world. And maybe in that moment, he was. The next morning, Jack climbed a nearby hill, took out his emergency flare, and shot it into the sky. The red blaze streaked over the forest, and he prayed someone would see it. They didn't wait long. By midday, the sound of rotors echoed above the trees. A rescue chopper hovered and descended. Paramedics rushed in with stretchers and blankets. Jack gave them the children, his voice calm but firm as he explained what had happened. Minus the bear. No one would believe that part, anyway. As the helicopter lifted off with Danny and Sophie safely aboard, Jack stood beside the cabin, silent. He had done his part. But something tugged at him, a longing, a goodbye unsaid. He looked toward the forest one last time. Still no bear. Days later, back in town, the newspapers called it a miracle. Children found alive. After 5 days in Alaskan wilderness, no one questioned how they had survived. No one asked how they were kept warm or fed. The officials chalked it up to luck and resilience. But Jack knew better. A week passed. Jack returned to the river where it all began. The snow had thinned. The water ran clear. He stood at the same spot with a bucket of fish. And he waited. Hours passed. The sun dipped. The wind whispered. Then at the tree line. Movement. The bear. She stepped out slowly, older, limping slightly, her fur patchy. But her eyes were the same. Jack picked up a fish and tossed it across the river. She caught it. This time she ate. No urgency, no hunger, just peace. Jack sat down on the bank, watching her. Every year after, on that same day, she returned. And every year, Jack waited. Because some bonds, those forged not in words but in wild silence, are never broken.